So welcome, Augustine, to our new interview series where we speak to champions of digital trust. Who are you and why should we trust you?
I'm Augustine Fou. I've been a digital marketer for 25 years. I've been focused on the problem of ad fraud in the last 10, and also the privacy issues that are now bubbling up. So people are becoming more sensitized, about their personal information being leaked or collected by other parties. I would say, in general, the way I think about trust is you actually shouldn't trust anybody or shouldn't trust any app or any company until they've kind of earned that and proven it repeatedly over time. I think using a kind of a cybersecurity framework called zero trust, you really almost have to operate in that with that mindset because right now whatever you do online, whatever you do on your mobile devices is being tracked by someone else. So you really got to be sensitive to that in order to have a better understanding of privacy and therefore how to protect it. So I would generally recommend, even for myself, like you don't have to trust me. Let me prove it to you. Let me show you data, and I have to earn the trust from you, just like anyone else.
I love that. Thank you. We could dive into a lot of that. We could dive into the zero trust. We could dive into the products that you offer for both corporates and consumers, but we'll probably do that in a later interview. We'll kick off with the next question, which is how do you contribute to trust in the digital world?
So what I've been working on is a platform is used to measure digital ads. It's called Foo Analytics, and just like you have Google Analytics for your website, Foo Analytics is used for digital ads. Part of it is to determine where your ads went, and part of it is to determine whether it's a human or a bot that caused the ad to load, right? So fraud or not. And the way we build trust is by showing our work, by showing the data. Right. So a lot of times the companies or the ad tech vendors will say, trust us, we're accredited, or there's this other vendor that says there's no fraud or there's high viewability. Usually that is a black box, which means that they don't explain anything to you. They don't even like to show you the data. So the way we build trust is we actually show them all the data and explain to them what they're seeing. And if we explain it in a way that they can actually understand why we mark something as fraudulent, i.e., a bot, and why we mark something else as not fraudulent, once they understand that, then they can be part of the solution, right? So they can actually see the data, they can understand the data, and then they can make better business decisions based on that understanding. So that's how we earn trust. That's how we build trust, right? They don't have to trust us ahead of time, right? We're going to show them the data, and if we've done our job correctly, then they actually have a better understanding of what they're looking at after seeing the data.
Love that. And I think actually we did just dive into the products that you offer. So can you elaborate on the consumer offering versus the corporate offering?
The consumer offering is really not rolled out widely, but let me just tell you something that I've been building with my mobile developer over the last 5 years. So right now, one of the key vectors of malware getting on people's devices, it would be the ads. Okay, so for years and years, the email channel has been very locked down because now cybersecurity vendors will literally scan every single email, every single link in the email to see if those led to malicious websites. Okay, so that
Mm,
channel has been very locked down, so it's much harder for bad guys to get malware
yeah.
onto into your company. But the ads are now a vector where they can lace it with malicious code, right? So the ads that show on major websites, because the publisher doesn't know ahead of time what ad is going to get served into that ad slot, that gives the bad guys an opportunity to now send in some ads that are laced with malware. Okay, so one of the key things I've been working on is an ad blocker because at this point it's still very very difficult to find the malicious code in the ads, but you can protect yourself by blocking the ads entirely, right? So that's one of the things. And the other thing is blocking the trackers because you've heard of the case where Facebook can track you even if you're not logged in, or even if
Yeah,
you took
yeah.
no action on a website. It's because they have these tracking pixels that are built into the website, right? Like the Facebook share button and things like that. So anytime you just visit a web page, even if you're not logged into Facebook or you're not logged into that site, they can still track you, right? So in those cases, we have to block the trackers so that there's not this gigantic harvesting of people's data within, and they don't even know what's happening. So that's the more consumer-facing product. I'm in beta with it. There's only a handful of people who are actually using it, but I've been using it for the last 5 years, and family members, and so on and so forth. But again, the concept is very simple. It's to block the ads, which is a vector for malware and ransomware and things like that, and block the trackers so people can actually better manage and protect their own privacy.
That's fantastic, because I'm a massive fan of ad blockers, although it does inhibit your ability to navigate certain sites because you'll get the pop-up. I saw one on YouTube yesterday. So they're cracking down on people that have ad blockers because it stops their earning potential. It stops their revenue opportunities. But there are more and more people adding ad blockers now. And
Let me tell you how to solve that for publishers, because it might sound like, oh well, you're harming the ecosystem because you're one of those people who block ads and publishers rely on ad revenue, right? I'm one of those people. So, but I'm a cybersecurity researcher as well. So for the publishers, the way to get around that is if the publishers are serving ads, kind of like they were doing in 1995, so 20 years ago.
mm,
If the publisher is serving the ads and the ads are coming from a domain that's recognizable, right? So we differentiate the domain that the person is visiting. So say the person is visiting New York Times. Right now, all the ads are being served by third-party domains like doubleclick.net or other
mm,
domains.
mm,
Once the publishers actually sell ads that are served from a domain that is theirs, right? Ads.newyorktimes.com or something, then people can still see ads. I don't have any problem with New York Times showing me ads, right? Because I
yeah,
know that's
yeah,
how they make revenue. So I do want to support them. But as long as they use third party code and leave this kind of window of opportunity for bad guys to put malware in there and compromise my devices,
yeah.
I have to protect myself. But yes, we do want to support publishers, and I'm encouraging both the advertisers to buy direct from the publishers and the publishers to reduce as much of that ad tech as possible on their pages. Because there's other things happening, right? In that ad slot, there could be 500 other trackers that came in through the ad that you didn't know about and the publisher didn't know about. So all of that is actually harming the ecosystem more than me blocking the ads.
Augustine, we used to call it, I've worked in the ad network space for a long time. We used to call it the Toy Story effect. So when, I can't remember the kid's name out of Toy Story, but when his parents stop watching the toys and the lights go off and they're left in the room by themselves, they all come alive and they all start doing their own thing and interacting with each other. That metaphor carries over to the way that ad slots through third parties act. As soon as the lights go out,
Yeah.
as soon as you're not looking at them, that's when the nefarious content gets in.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
basically, for consumers, they have to take steps to protect themselves because the
Yeah.
platforms are not doing that. In fact, the platforms are the ones collecting the data, and also all the other ad tech middlemen. They're collecting the data for the purpose of selling the data for ad targeting. So, there are things like Apple iOS devices. Apple is actually blocking a lot of the trackers. They're deleting the third-party cookies, right? You can still have first-party cookies, which means New York Times can still set their own cookie to say, okay, you're logged in or not. But what they're doing is they're preventing the third parties from setting cookies and bringing in a lot of privacy invasive trackers that people don't even know about. Because most humans, when they're visiting New York Times, they know they're interacting with New York Times, but not the 500 other ad tech vendors that are harvesting their data behind the
Yes.
scenes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always amazed. I need to start using your software. I use or have been using Ghostery, and it's always interesting when you click on it and it shows you the volume of trackers. Um, do you have an average number of trackers per page on any given publisher?
averages hide the truth. So I'll tell you, if for a good publisher, they will probably not load more than 10 to 15 ads per page. But then we have the fraudulent publishers who are attempting to load 3,500 ads per page. Okay, so there's no average that can sufficiently capture that, right? So it's night and day different. And I'll
Yeah.
mention one other tool that I have. It's called Page X-ray. So
Yes.
PAGEXRAY dot fooanalytics.com. You can put any web page into there, and we'll scan it for you. And basically we'll show you what they're trying to call into the page. And so you can very easily see, like if you just go scan a New York Times page, there's going to be a finite number of things that are called in. So obviously it's still a little bit bigger than most people expect. But when you look at some of these MFA websites, I mean, it could be tens of thousands of things they attempt to call into the page. Now, what I mean by call into the page is that this code is not visible in the HTML of the page, right? So you're never going to see it if you just view source because it's all JavaScript. So when one JavaScript executes, it can call in 10 other things. And when each of those JavaScript executes, it can call in
Yeah.
another
Yeah.
50 things, right? So
Yeah.
it becomes this tree graph that just explodes. And that's what Page X-ray is designed to show you, things that you can't see when just looking at the HTML of the page itself.
And we have been through that together. I think we went through that together on one of our previous calls. Right.
Yeah.
Last question. If you had a magic wand, Augustine, what would be the one thing you would change in today's digital world?
It's a hard question to answer because, having studied the fraud aspect of digital marketing for 11 years, I can tell you from firsthand experience that change doesn't happen very quickly. So, like I don't really think there's a magic wand to do things like that. But stuff that you're working on, stuff that other practitioners in the privacy space are working on. It's like we're going to see slow change. We're going to see
Yeah.
change come about as the platforms are now finally being held accountable, right? So it's taken laws, regulations, and even governments like the DOJ getting involved in suing Google or something
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
actually start moving the ball because there's so much momentum built into that it was hard to change directions, hard to get it to shift even by a little bit. So I think we're all moving in the right direction. I think change will happen. I just don't think it's going to happen very quickly, and things won't happen overnight. But I do think that we are moving in the direction as more people get involved in that, and also as the end users get involved in that. Right when they're using certain piece of technology on their own device to protect themselves, then advertisers will realize, collecting all that data is just untenable. Right, it's not something they can keep doing for the next 10 years. So once they start looking for alternatives, I am hopeful that things will actually get better, right? Privacy will get better, trust will get better. But again, trust is earned over time, right? You
Yeah.
can't just
Yeah.
instantly give it and so on and so forth.
We talk a lot here at Trust about data sovereignty and the ability for um, the blockchain, and I'm going to allow you to talk about one of the topics that you spoke to me about, I think, over a year ago. So we talk about decentralization, how the blockchain might be able to allow us to have more data sovereignty. And you have, Augustine, a fantastic vision of how the future of um, us acting on the web and content being disseminated on the web. You describe them, each of them, as atoms. I wonder if you want to give us a description of that.
This might be a little afield from what we're talking about here, but and it is very forward looking. But the concept is that each piece of content is like an atom. Each user is like an atom, right? Atom being the smallest unit in our known physical universe. So the idea there is that we've already seen these trends happening, right? So when we take an article from New York Times and we post it onto Facebook, most users see the headline, the picture, and the first paragraph. And then that's it. They don't tend to actually click through and go
Yeah,
read the whole article,
yeah,
right? So think of that as kind of a snippet. What's happening is now that we're really separating the content from the origin, right? From the website from which it came. Okay. So the problem with that is that a lot of people they just look at the headline, the picture, and the first paragraph, and they don't bother to really vet it and see where it came from. So I'll give you a kind of a negative example in the past. So in 2016, here in the United States, there was a fake website called abcnew.com, right? It's very
Mm,
similar to
mm,
ABC News with an S.com, right? abcnews.com is a real ABC News outlet. abcnew.com was meant to disseminate false information, right, around the 2016 elections. If most people didn't look carefully, they would just, oh, this is ABC News. Let me just click that and share it on. So that's what led to what we now know as the amplification of misinformation and disinformation surrounding the 2016 elections here in the US. So again, it becomes very important to know the content. So in this case, like the piece of content itself has to stand alone, has to have signals of trust and quality built into it, because we now can no longer rely on just the website from which it came. Right. So previously, years and years ago, you would say if you read a page on New York Times, you're trusting the publisher. You're trusting that the processes of that news organization, right? They have journalists that have journalistic integrity when they write the content. They have editors to make sure they vet the content before they publish it, and so on and so forth,
mhm.
right? The processes create the trust. But now, if the individual articles are kind of posted somewhere else, you almost don't have the ability to check the source, right? Or check to know that there's New York Times journalistic processes in place to make sure that to ensure the quality and the trustworthiness of the content. So we need something else to take its place, right? So I won't get into all the technical details, but if pieces of content are now isolated on their own, like atoms, and users are now isolated on their own, like atoms, what does this fifth internet. I like to call it the fifth internet. What does this future state of the internet look like when atoms have to now determine the trustworthiness of other atoms before they interact with them, right? And I'll kind of just end with a simple concept that trust. I'll use the word called trust history, right? Trust is built up over time. So if a particular content atom has been vetted and read by many people, many user atoms, and they've all said it's trustworthy and it's useful and it's valuable, then the length of that trust history tail will give you some clues about the trustworthiness and the value of that piece of content, and you can get that signal with that content atom, right? And you no longer rely on who published it, right? So it's really vetted by the community. So there's a lot of these principles that we're taking, decentralization, crowdsourcing, right? If enough people said
Yeah.
it's good. Um, so again, these are future-looking concepts, but I think the current state has kind of given us some ideas of what it should look like, because we've already seen abuses, right? Especially when pieces of content get separated from the original source.
Mm,
Right now,
mm.
people can just pretend, here's another website, and now it's printing a whole bunch of news articles, and people assume that there's some vetting, but no, in fact, there's not
Yeah,
only no vetting, those pieces of content are deliberately made to spread false information, right?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen just that through um, the surge of mis and disinformation as a result of the Israeli Hamas conflict. I have written today a piece on disinformation, misinformation, how it's created, why it's disseminated, what's the process there, what's the value of trust, and how we as individuals determine what truth is. And in fact, we were talking to Heidi Sass, and we've got her interview going live very soon. And she's a massive proponent of social proof. And there I guess, is no better way to justify the trustworthiness of a piece of content than a group of respected individuals within your peer group saying that this piece of content is validated by them, and they agree that this is of the highest trustworthiness. Much better than a load of a bigger community on Facebook who you've never met before, all liking.
Yeah, it's basically you need the people who are knowledgeable about the type of content to be able to say that, right? So I
That's
contrast
good.
that with
Yes.
kind of like the 5-star reviews or movie ratings or reviews on
Yeah.
Amazon, right? that has also been gamed by the bad guys. So they'll
Yeah,
send a whole
yeah,
bunch of bots and click the 5-star rating. So then all of these have 5-star ratings and like 10,000 5-star ratings. All of that can be easily faked. So what Heidi said, I also can corroborate and say it's the right approach, right? You want someone who's actually knowledgeable about oncology to chime in on about an article about cancer or oncology. Someone who is an NFL star has no need to chime in on an article, about oncology, right? So there are small groups of people who are actually knowledgeable about a
yeah.
particular topic who need to be the people, right? The cohort who's going to actually review and say, yes, this is accurate and it is valuable, and therefore you can trust it.
I love that. That's kind of what I was thinking. Academic peer reviews. Now we've gone on a bit longer than other interviews have done, but it's an area that I find incredibly fascinating, and I think you're a fascinating human being, Augustine. I think you're doing some amazing work. The final question is: how can people find out more about what you're doing?
I'm on LinkedIn all the time. So on LinkedIn, just Google my name, Augustine Fou, Fou, is the last name. And for those advertisers who are looking for a way to measure their ads, it's going to be fooanalytics.com. And they can request an invite. I can set them up with an account.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you join our new interview series.